What is up, people? My name is Andrew, and I'm the host of Food with Friends. I'm coming to you from the beautiful Palo Alto, aka Silicon Valley, where we're learning about Michael over some tasty Thai food. So far, we've heard about Michael's story about growing up in the Bronx, deciding he wanted to become a physicist, making that happen, and living the Silicon Valley dream. Now, we're going to dive into his story of his time at Amazon, where he helped develop a fundamental test for pre-release devices and had some of his work appear on the desk of the Jeff Bezos. Enjoy.
So after that, I decided to go work for a corporation. And a friend of mine worked at Amazon at Lab 126, which is kind of the R&D division for Amazon. And so I applied there and got a job. And I was assigned to develop a new electrostatic discharge spec.
Okay.
So, if you walk across a rug and then touch something metal, a spark jumps from your finger. So if you were touching, say, an Amazon Alexa device or your phone or an e-reader, that spark could damage the device. And so my job was to figure out how to prevent that from happening. And if you couldn't prevent it, how to measure the reliability of the device in the field.
Okay.
So I went out and I did a survey of electrostatic discharge in the field. So I drove. Electrostatic discharge is much more severe and frequent in places where the weather is dry.
Okay.
Because moisture essentially conducts away electrostatic charge.
Oh, no moisture, you got a little bit of a problem.
Right. So I went around to very dry places in Arizona and California.
Yeah.
And I brought my oscilloscope and my ESD gun and measurement equipment and just tested devices all over the place and was able to build up a spectrum of what ESD looked like in places where the customer might be using our devices. And based on that spectrum and a survey of like 100,000 people about what parts of their device they normally touched and how frequently, I came up with a test, an internal test of devices. So Amazon could use this test to measure a new device that they were developing and determine how reliable it would be before they actually released it. So in the early days, Amazon didn't have ESD testing, and they had this one product that failed very easily when people touched it.
Oh, no.
And so it was like a big black eye on to Amazon.
Great product until
until
done.
someone tries to touch it.
Yeah.
So they were trying to avoid that problem as much as possible. So the test worked. And so now it's used for all of Amazon's consumer electronics products. So every device Amazon makes, including devices they're still designing, they'll have some subset of those devices be tested according to my procedure.
Wow.
And to determine what its reliability is before they release the product. And if it doesn't pass, if it doesn't have like 99.5% reliability, then they'll go back to the drawing board and try and improve its reliability.
That's major. So things you don't think about that can make or break a product.
Right. So that's most of what I did. I was also, when I got to Amazon, at the time, IBM and Microsoft and Google all were doing quantum computing, and they were offering quantum computing as a web service. And I kind of had assumed that Amazon also had a quantum computing group. They were just keeping it secret. But when I got to Amazon, it was like no one was interested in quantum computing at all.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was surprising.
Was there a theory behind, or was there a reason behind it? Or?
Well, I think the reason was that Amazon has 10 commandments. I think it's more now. I think they have 13 commandments now.
Yeah.
They had 10 commandments, and the very first commandment was start with the customer and work backwards. So no customer had gone to a manager in Amazon or someone in Amazon and said, why don't you guys offer quantum computing as a web service?
Okay.
Or why aren't you working on quantum computing? No one had ever said that, so they ignored it.
Why would they build it if no one's asking?
Yeah. So I started sort of proselytizing quantum computing as a future business opportunity for Amazon. So I started giving a seminar on quantum physics, and eventually got together a group of about 50 people who were interested in quantum physics and quantum computing, and who started also pushing to have Amazon get into quantum computing. And I would give talks to management whenever possible, and try and get more people interested and involved. But nothing really happened until a customer went to AWS, Amazon Web Services, and asked when they're going to offer quantum computing. So that really took that step to do. And then the AWS sent a VP down to recruit me to help him get up to speed on quantum computing.
Okay, so really they followed those commandments like nothing else.
Yeah, it was funny. So I taught him the basics of quantum physics and the basics of quantum computing. And some of my friends from grad school were leaders in the field of quantum computing. So I took him to their labs and their companies.
Yeah.
And I also invited people, experts in the field, in to give talks at Amazon Lab 126, and he came to those. And eventually we wrote up a proposal/business plan for, is quantum computing worth Amazon's effort to get into? And if so, how should we get into the field?
Yeah.
And that write-up, that business proposal or white paper, it was called. That white paper was eventually presented to Jeff Bezos, and Jeff decided to approve it. And so we suddenly had money and to start building a group. And so we hired an expert, world expert in quantum computing from England to come over and start up a group.
Yeah.
And working with him, we started recruiting other people for the group. At about that point, various things happened, and I left Amazon. But the group is now quite large, and they have an experimental group down at Caltech, and they now offer quantum computing as a web service. So I think that's probably the biggest impact, more than the ESD. That's probably the biggest impact I made on Amazon.
Where do you see the future of quantum computing going?